I always believed that love was enough to keep a family together. I raised my son, Ethan, with all the care I could give. After his mother passed away, I became both father and mother to him. I worked double shifts at the hardware store, fixed neighbors' fences on weekends, and skipped vacations for years, just to make sure he had the life I never did. Everything I earned went into our little house on Oak Ridge Street. It wasn't much, but it held the warmth of years gone by. Every wall had a story, every window knew our laughter. That house was more than bricks, it was memory, sacrifice, and love bound together. But one afternoon, I woke up to find a stranger in my living room. He was wearing a real estate badge, holding a clipboard. He smiled politely and said, "Sir, the buyer will be here in an hour to inspect the property." I thought it was a mistake. I said, "What buyer?" He showed me the papers. Deed. Signatures. Legal transfer. My name was gone. Ethan's signature was there instead. He had sold my house, while I was sleeping in it. At first, I couldn't even speak. I just sat there, staring at those papers, feeling something inside me quietly shatter. All the years of working, saving, loving, gone with one decision made behind my back. When Ethan came home that night, I didn't yell. I didn't ask why. He looked at me like a stranger, guilty, restless, defensive. "Dad," he said, "I needed the money. It's complicated. You'll understand someday." I just nodded and walked out onto the porch. It was the same porch where I had taught him to ride his first bike, where we had once watched fireworks together every 4th of July. That night, I made a promise to myself, not of anger, but of understanding. If my own son had betrayed me for money, then I needed to teach him what money could never buy. I didn't plan to destroy him. I planned to awaken him. Ethan had changed ever since he started working with his friend Lucas, a real estate agent with too much ambition and too little conscience. They were in their late 20s, always talking about quick money, flipping houses, smart investments. Ethan had inherited a bit of charm from his mother and a restless hunger from the world. I used to think it was drive, but it was greed disguised as success. When his mother, Linda, passed, I thought he'd grow softer. Instead, he hardened. I suppose grief affects us differently. He started spending more, talking less. He'd come home late, smell of cologne and confidence. I could tell he was chasing something. Maybe status, maybe approval, but definitely not peace. I remember one evening when I tried to talk to him. We were sitting on the porch, the air cool, the sun low. I said, "Ethan, life isn't about having everything. It's about keeping what matters." He smiled faintly. "Dad, you worked your whole life and ended up with one small house. I don't want to end up like that." I looked at him for a long time, realizing I'd raised someone who valued things more than people. Still, I kept loving him. Every father does, even when it hurts. I didn't know then that Lucas had convinced Ethan to use my property as collateral for a quick deal. When the deal fell apart, Ethan panicked. Instead of coming to me, he sold the house quietly to cover his losses. And now I was standing in that same house, with boxes packed by strangers, hearing my memories being measured by square feet. The new owner, a woman named Margaret, was kind enough to give me a month to leave. I thanked her sincerely. She had no idea what had happened. I moved into a small rented apartment at the edge of town, 1 bedroom, thin walls, and a view of a parking lot. Every night I sat by the window and thought of Ethan. Not with hatred, but with sorrow. He hadn't just taken my home. He had traded love for luxury. And that was a debt I knew life would eventually make him pay. But I didn't want life to handle it alone. I wanted to help it, quietly. Ethan and Lucas started their own small property business after that, E&L Developments. They posted glossy photos, wore suits, and spoke like men who had made it. They even appeared in a local newspaper article once, young entrepreneurs reviving the town's real estate market. People admired them. I watched from afar, smiling faintly at how easy admiration can be bought. But I also watched patterns. Their deals, their projects, their clients. I still had friends who worked in the city records office, and through them, I learned how fragile their empire really was. Most of their investments were built on borrowed money and high promises. Ethan came to visit occasionally, always in a rush. He'd bring me groceries, leave them on the table, and talk about his next big opportunity. I listened quietly. Sometimes, he'd pause and look at me as if wanting to apologize, but pride held his tongue. One evening I said, "Ethan, you know, a house built on sand looks beautiful, until it rains."
He smirked.
"Dad, I'm not worried about rain. I make the weather." That night, I wrote something in my notebook. When arrogance builds the roof, time will always open the sky. And so, I waited. I didn't confront him. I didn't tell him I knew about his loans, his unpaid taxes, or the clients he had overpromised. I simply began to move quietly in the background. I reached out to Margaret, the woman who had bought my house. She had already started renovating it. I told her my story. She was shocked, even teary-eyed. "I had no idea," she said. I smiled. "You don't need to feel guilty. But if one day you decide to sell, please let me know first." She nodded. "Of course. You'll be the first to know." Then, I started volunteering at the town's housing support center, helping elderly people with property papers, checking documents, warning them about scams. Over time, people began to trust me. Some even came to me for advice before signing contracts. Ethan and Lucas didn't know it, but word about their dishonest dealings was spreading quietly, not through gossip, but through awareness. One woman came to me with a contract from their company. She was about to sell her inherited land for far less than it was worth. I guided her. She backed out. Others did the same. Slowly, their business started losing trust, not because I ruined their name, but because truth began to circulate naturally. Meanwhile, I kept saving every penny. I lived simply, worked part-time repairing furniture, and waited for one day, the day Margaret would call me. It took 3 years. One morning, I got a call. "Mr. Brooks," she said. "I'm moving closer to my daughter. If you still want the house, I'll sell it to you. Same price you sold it for." I smiled quietly. "Yes, Margaret. I'd love to bring it home." I bought the house back, every nail, every memory, every inch of sacrifice that Ethan had thrown away. When I stood again on that porch, I felt peace. Not triumph, just quiet restoration. The air smelled the same, the wood creaked the same way beneath my feet. I painted the front door again, the same blue Linda had chosen. I repaired the mailbox. I brought back her old wind chime and hung it by the porch light. But I didn't tell Ethan. I wanted him to find out naturally. That day came soon. Their company had collapsed. Lucas had fled after taking money from clients and leaving Ethan to face lawsuits alone. Ethan came to my apartment, the one I had already vacated, only to find it empty. He called me in panic. "Dad, where are you?" I told him to meet me at the old house. When he arrived, he froze at the gate. The sold sign was gone. The windows glowed with light. My car was in the driveway. He looked around like a man seeing a ghost. "You bought it back?" he asked softly. "Yes," I said, standing on the porch. "Margaret sold it to me. At the same price you did." He swallowed hard. His eyes watered, though he tried to hide it. "Dad, I didn't mean to." I stopped him gently. "Ethan, you don't need to explain. I understood your reasons long ago. You wanted more than this house could offer. But I also knew, one day you'd realize what you lost." He sat down on the porch steps and buried his face in his hands. "I lost everything. Lucas took the money. The bank froze my accounts. I have nowhere to go." I nodded slowly. "Then I suppose it's time you learn what home truly means." He looked up, ashamed. "You're still letting me in?" "Of course," I said. "It's still your home." "You just forgot its value." That night, we sat in silence, father and son, under the same roof once more. No anger, no lecture, just the sound of the wind through the chimes. Over the next few months, Ethan stayed with me. He helped repair the backyard, fixed the fence, repainted the rooms. I didn't speak much about the past. I let the silence do the teaching. Sometimes, I'd find him staring at old photographs of his mother. Once he whispered, "She would have hated what I became." I said quietly, "She would have still loved you. But she'd be waiting for you to love yourself again." He began working at a local construction firm, starting from the bottom. He stopped wearing suits, started wearing humility. I watched him grow, not in wealth, but in wisdom. One evening, he came to me holding an envelope. Inside was a check, not large but meaningful. "Dad," he said, "it's a start. For everything I took from you."
I smiled. "You didn't take from me, Ethan.
You just borrowed time to understand."
He looked down, tears in his eyes.
"How can you forgive me so easily?" "Because," I said, "forgiveness isn't for you, it's for me. I couldn't carry bitterness in this house again." He nodded slowly, understanding at last. In spring, we planted new roses in the garden. The same kind Linda loved. Ethan worked quietly, hands in the soil, heart in the task. When the first flower bloomed, he stood there for a long time, just staring. "That," I said, "is what patience gives back." He smiled softly, a kind of peace I hadn't seen in him for years. Years have passed since then. The house stands stronger than ever. Ethan runs a small carpentry workshop now, teaching others the trade. He's not rich in money, but he's rich in understanding. Sometimes, I sit on the porch at sunset, sipping tea, listening to the chime. It plays the same gentle tune, the sound of lessons learned without shouting, of justice without revenge. People often ask me if I ever got back at my son. I tell them, yes, by not fighting him. My revenge wasn't in taking something from him. It was in letting truth do the work, in letting time show him the cost of greed and the value of love. He once sold my house while I was sleeping. But in the end, I bought back my peace, and gave him back his soul. And that, I suppose, is the quietest form of victory. Because sometimes, silence really is the best revenge.